There's plenty of news to talk about here, so I'll let you take it away.
Yes, it's a big week for Peloton, whether that is good or bad. They have earnings today post-market. And of course, yesterday we saw a huge move in Peloton. They closed about 15% lower, shedding about $4 billion off their market cap in one single day. Following news that they said that they're actually recalling their Tread Plus treadmills, and they apologized for not sort of taking action sooner, because this news first broke with these treadmill, that they were dangerous to children and pets back in March 18th. So now 2 months later, they're saying, yes, we were wrong here, basically. They said they're working on a repair that will be offered to their current Tread Plus owners in the coming weeks. But of course, we know that they were apparently debuting a lesser expensive model in the US this year. But now the question is, will they actually do so with these negative headwinds sort of, circulating? And, when will the actual rollout of this lesser expensive model come, if it does come? So that is not good, of course. But I have to say that, in 2020, the stock was a huge winner. It jumped about 400% for the year. And we saw revenue surge to about $1.8 billion from $915 million a year prior. Their market value capped in mid-January at about $49 billion. So this was, of course, a beneficiary of people being, working from home, people staying home, gyms closed. So they saw that great pop. Now, through January to now, they've shed about 50% of their value. So they've given back a good portion of these 2020 gains. And there is just so many different opinions about this company. I mean, you can't find right now stronger voices for the bears and the bulls for this case. But I think there's a lot of things, they're sort of doing right, and then things they obviously need to work on. One of their biggest issues is their manufacturing and supply issues, which have created hugely long wait times for some of their customers. Plus, of course, the vaccine rollout, which is good for us as, consumers, is not so great for Peloton, as so many investors are starting to rethink the company's future growth prospects. Another thing, though, is I really think that Peloton sort of remains the clear beneficiary of this secular trend towards at-home fitness. Now, I know a lot of people say that they were excited to get back to their gyms or some of their group fitness, but I have to say that having a Peloton is an absolute luxury, not having to go into a smelly or sweaty locker room and just being able to work out at home. I mean, it is wonderful. It's part of the reason I haven't gone back to a gym, because I actually don't enjoy going to a gym, and I would rather run in 5 degrees, because I really think that there is a whole market of people that say it is so much easier to never leave my home or to not have to travel and go to a gym. And I think that that is stickiness that we'll see with Peloton going forward. Another thing is they've really started to sort of offer different price points for all of their models. So now you can get a Peloton at a much more affordable price point, whereas back a few years ago, they were considered an absolute luxury item. Now they're still expensive, but I think their subscription-based model now is making it more affordable for so many people without even necessarily the bike to be a part of Peloton's sort of network, which is cool. But like I mentioned, right now, you can't make a stronger case for the bears and the bulls. I mean, people are absolutely heated about this company on social media, and both sides of the spectrum are sort of debating that. So that brings me to our first tweet today, which says, "Everything about Peloton screams sell. Peloton is a classic stay-at-home play, but with vaccines and reopenings, revenues and customer growth will surely slow. Now, a recall of its treadmills, about 20% of its revenues, after refuting the problem. Peloton offering to give refunds rather than fix. Brand taint." So I have to say that I think this is a little bit noisy right now. I think right now we're sort of in the midst of this treadmill scandal. I think that's a little bit of a PR stint too, because I have to say that I've used the Tread Plus. I mean, I could see how it would be unsafe for children and pets, whatever, but I think right now the bigger issue is, why are your children unsupervised on the treadmill? I mean, so I think this is a little bit of a PR thing that will, hopefully, go away. But our next tweet makes the case more for the bullish case, which says, "Whenever Peloton sells a bike, they gain a new salesperson." So I couldn't agree more. I mean, people love to talk about their Pelotons. I love to talk about a Peloton. I don't even own one. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, people will tell you they Peloton because there's a whole network of people with these fabulous instructors, and it sort of becomes this like cult-like following. Now, Kevin, this is super topical because I know that you just got a Peloton. So I have to say, like, are you now converted? Are you a salesperson for Peloton?
This is a tricky discussion to have, Jenny, because you brought up a point, and my blanket statement is any electric or motorized product used improperly is not safe, right? And so I don't want to get into who's at fault or anything like that. We'll leave that to other people, but we'll deal with the popularity of this company. And you're right, in the last month, I have gotten a Peloton and I use it almost daily because I was getting allergic reactions from working out with a mask on. So now I can work out in my home. It's about 15 feet from where I'm sitting right now. And if you like music with a workout, that's the surprise that I've experienced from Peloton. Not only the instructors are very positive and it's fun, but the music is outstanding. And it's something that I didn't realize that was so strong with Peloton. But Jenny, you're right, it's more affordable. You can do it, you can pay monthly on this, interest-free. So it's about it's about the price of a medium health club in terms of the price point. There's a lot of things going on, but this is catastrophic bad news for this company. And they've got to get themselves around this issue as quickly as possible to stop the bleeding or apply a tourniquet to this problem. So they didn't play it exactly well right when the news came out. They've had a much more of a mea culpa since then. So the bike is the main seller for Peloton. The treadmill is not as big of a seller. So the popularity is still there, but this is, make no mistake, a huge problem for Peloton, guys.
Yeah, it's a black eye, but typically black eyes heal, especially for companies that have such strong loyalty like Peloton. But I'm sure as we dive into some social data here in a moment, we'll have an idea of what kind of impact it's having, at least in the near term. But Jenny Hornet, it's always a pleasure. Great setup as always, and thanks for joining us. As we say goodbye to Jenny, I want to welcome in the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Landon Swan, joining us. So, Landon, what I'm hearing now is that Peloton might be the new CrossFit. Everyone's got to tell you when they got a Peloton, which is not a bad thing if you're the company that sells them. But to Kevin's point, a little bit of a bruise, a little bit of black eye as of late with the recall of the treadmill. How important is that story going to be going forward as you compare something like this to other kind of crises that maybe other companies have faced?
Sure. So I think this is actually really interesting timing. So they, on April 17th is when the CPSC put out that warning and Peloton refuted it. And then they changed their mind, I guess, yesterday when they have earnings coming out today. So that's very interesting that they're doing that. It makes me kind of wonder what's the strategy on that, because, maybe they want to get that out of the way.
Love
and
this point.
Some good numbers. So, that's their choice is when they released that recall, and they did it the day before earnings. So very interesting. I can tell you on happiness, that's one thing that obviously we track. We talk a lot about purchase intent, and we can get to that. But when you look at the happiness of this company, it was extremely high. It was in the 90s, which is very high for really any company. And then on that warning, it dipped down into the high 50s. And then on the recall, it actually got below 50%. It's the lowest we've ever seen. It's the biggest negative spike we've ever seen with this company. I really hasn't had any negative spikes before that, before this treadmill issue. So I think it will very quickly bounce back as this fades from the news. They're getting out ahead of it. It took them a month to do it, but they're finally, addressing the problem. And what I guess the question is that going to impact perceived quality or risk of this product? My gut says that people are not going to think, well, if I buy a bike, it could harm me or my child or pet. I don't think I don't think it's going to carry over from treadmill to bike. And the fact that they're getting, they're taking care of the problem with the treadmill likely are going to be able to put this behind them. Plus, it's not a huge percentage of their revenue, as that tweeter pointed out. So, what's going to happen with purchase intent? When we look at purchase intent for this quarter, the quarter that's, January through March, the one that's about to be reported, it's actually the highest that we've got on record. But since that point, since the end of March, the quarter ended, purchase intent has sort of taken a bit of a nosedive. And so that is concerning for us. We think that they're going to report really strong numbers, but their guidance could be weak. And so that's a little bit of a concern for us. But you've got the stock selling off 17%, really wild. I mean, going into this week, we put out an earnings score from -100 to 100 every week on a company. We were -47 for Peloton, so bearish. And we're always encouraging Monday entry and Friday exit. So every trade that anybody that follows LikeFolio put on is already at max profit because of the 17% sell-off yesterday. Now it's really a question of what's going forward. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting about this call, because they're going to take a ton of questions about the treadmill, but they got out ahead of it. And I think that had they announced that recall on an earnings call or at the same time, then it would have completely overshadowed any kind of numbers that they have. So it may be a bit of a tell that they've got good numbers. That's just sort of a gut call by me. But our data says they've got really strong numbers for the quarter that's being reported and possibly weak numbers for guidance.
So, Landon, this is a kind of a consistent discussion that we're having with LikeFolio, and I think it's one of the big points of this earnings season, and that is where purchase intent is falling to is still exponentially more. It's off its highs, as everything like this is going to be. Right? And as spring comes, probably like Jenny Horn was mentioning, people are going outside more. People may be working out at other places. That being said, this purchase intent is still settling exponentially higher than it was before the pandemic hit. So the stickiness of this is what is really important here, because we saw it in Activision Blizzard, right? Everyone assumes the knee-jerk reaction to the opening up of the U.S. economy is that all these stay-at-home things are just going to drop off to zero. And that's not happening, right? There's stickiness in all these things, like Activision Blizzard. I think there's going to be stickiness in Peloton. Now, they've got a problem that we've talked about already. But what do you think about the fact, my counterpoint is, this is still settling exponentially higher than it was at, correct?
Yeah, I think so. So, one of the things we look at to decide how sticky is Peloton, especially important as you talk about it, is weather's, starting to get better. Potentially, gyms are opening up and you've got more options than working out at home, is what is the app usage? Yep. And so the app usage remains very high. And I think happiness is going to bounce back, because anytime you've got something that started at 90%, you've got a bad news cycle, obviously. But I think that as that gets in the rearview mirror, I think that the happiness will continue to go back up to 85, 90% most likely. But the app usage is very high. That means that all their products, people are using them. It's not just the treadmill, obviously. It's the bike, but it's also the app alone with all the different types of workouts that they have. So, this really could be, obviously it's a nightmare for traders unless you're bearish, which I think a lot of our members were, but maybe you weren't. But this is a nightmare for traders. It's very volatile. However, there's an argument to be made that this could be a buying opportunity for a great company that has executed well. I think one hiccup like this is not define the company long term. I think that they have revolutionized home workouts. And as you talked about, Kevin, going to the gym, depending on your state's policies, nobody really likes wearing a mask. So I think that, gyms are still struggling. Peloton's the answer for that. But people talk about going outside and whatnot. I'd love to hear your opinion, Kevin. Would you rather ride on your Peloton in 70 degrees in your own house with the music, or would you rather hop on a bike and go brave the streets? What do you think? Is that a legitimate competitor or alternative to Peloton, actually going outside?
Landon, no one's going to run me over in my living room and in front of my TV with the music on. I don't have to watch for traffic. I don't have to watch for my balance. I don't have to do anything. So the answer to that is, I still enjoy going to a lonely running path and running every few days. But in terms of my, I'm 100 years old. So in terms of saving my legs, Peloton does that, and it's safe right here in my living room. So, yeah, and I can do it in all weather. Landon. So I've really enjoyed so far my Peloton experience. Has nothing to do with the stock, though, obviously.
Guys, there's a ton to sum up here. So one, the major one, and you got it's the elephant in the room. The stock moved substantially yesterday. a lot of this, what perceived from the data, Landon, kind of negative news, maybe that's kind of already been priced in. And so I love your point about the game theory. It's one that I initially thought of as well. It's not a coincidence, more than likely, that we got this information the day before the earnings release, especially given that it's negative news. We know it's going to dominate the news cycle. Do they have something to counteract it coming out later this afternoon? I guess we'll find out. But Landon, my biggest issue now is going forward. What's the key metric? Is it connected fitness subscription ads? Because at this point, I would assume most people, if they were going to get the actual bike or treadmill, have actually probably gotten that. That demand pull forward was probably where this was expressed during quarantine. Now is it about getting, the basic kind of subscription to these other workouts that you're talking about? Because last I checked, not everyone only does cardio for workouts.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. I would disagree that when you say that everyone who's going to get a bike has got one, I don't think that's the case. I think you've got evangelists out there who have bought one, like Kevin, who are telling everyone how great it is. And you know what? It's a great product. My brother has one and he's got one. And he tells me all the time how much he loves it. And he's not a cycle type guy. I mean, but it gets him going on it. And I think that the more that happens, it could just be a tipping point. So I think we're very early on in just overall adoption of this. However, I think the metric to really watch is the app usage. Is that remaining high? Are they getting new subscribers and are they keeping them? Our data says, yes, they are doing both of those things. So I think that's very good going forward. Short term, obviously the treadmill stuff, but then you've also got the delivery concerns. They're not able to keep up with demand on the bikes right now. If there's any kind of recall influx, I know that they're offering refunds as well, but if they want to do the repairs, I mean, there's 125,000 of those treadmills out there. That's only going to slow down deliveries of the bike. And so that may be that's why they put out the refund option, because they didn't want that to cause another hiccup in the delivery chain. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a tough quarter or so, I think, for them, but I'm really watching this earnings report, because if they sell at all, I'd be surprised. Now the fact that they're already kind of priced in, what else could have to happen for them to actually sell off more than what they've already done yesterday? That was a significant 17%. It's ridiculous for an earnings move. And so I think that they've already kind of got that out of the way, is my gut. And I think now it could be a good buying opportunity long term.
Good stuff. Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. We're all anxiously awaiting this report alongside those of Roku and Square. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, Kev, we thought Roku was fun. Peloton might even be more fun.